Good morning, boys and girls. It's Mrs. Connolly. Happy Wednesday. I just wanted to make another video to go over today's lesson since I think that sometimes it'll go a lot smoother if you watch this video before you get started on your daily work. All right, so at this point in the week, you should be on your third Reading Plus lesson. Now remember, the goal for these, you need to get 80% or higher for you to get your maximum amount of points. And it's really important that you're passing these lessons because they do go in as a mastery grade at the end of the week. All right, after you complete your third lesson on Reading Plus, you are going to pick 2 activities to complete in the Reading Wednesday 4-15 packet in your journal. So you'll answer the questions in your journal or on a piece of scrap paper. So if you look, I have the attachment right here, Reading 4-15. So when I click on that, it's gonna open up and you're going to see this attachment. There are 4 short readings, so you're gonna pick 2. The one thing to notice about all of them is that they're all informational. So that means they're all gonna give us true facts and information about a topic, and they are going to include some text features. So you have a choice. You could read about reflexes. You could read bugs for breakfast, big planet, small planet, and then every 4 years. Now, with these, you're going to be answering all of the questions, including the last question on all of them that says stretch. These are important because you actually need to cite text to support your answer. So it's really important that you're going back into the text and using that to support your answer. All right, so again, you're going to pick 2 of these to read and answer the questions. Now, if I go back to my agenda, okay, you are going to read Holes chapters 27 to 28, and then you're going to write in your journal for 10 minutes about what you read. And I want you to write today's date so that way you can kind of track your reading. And it's really important that you're staying on track with the reading because, again, you're going to have a quiz later in the week. And I also included the link, so you can just click on the link and then it'll take you right to the YouTube chapters. All right, last thing, complete Cape Canaveral vocab on Edmodo. Use your article or a dictionary to find the definitions. So if I click on the Cape Canaveral article, if you scroll all the way down, you should see Cape Canaveral vocabulary. Now it says here, all highlighted words and definitions are on the quiz. So the words you're going to be quizzed on are orbit, confrontation, launching, civilians, Canaveral, and associated. Okay, and then you have a crossword which is optional, but would be good practice for this week's quiz. All right, now I did not get to read the article with you, so I do want to read the article, and I will be going over some things that you will see on the quiz. All right, so Spanish discovery and origin of name. European explorer Ponce de Leon first discovered Cape Canaveral in 1513. He initially called the area Corrientes, a Spanish word that described the strong currents he experienced off its coast. At that time, these Indians inhabited the area. De Leon and another European, Francisco Gordillo, had a confrontation with them. The Ais had developed a method of making cane arrows with razor-sharp ends. The cane arrows killed many Europeans. As a result of that battle, the name Canaveral, meaning cane bearer, began appearing on maps of the area. All right, missile testing station. The United States Air Force acquired the land at Cape Canaveral in the 1940s. So to acquire something means like they gained that land. In late 1950, it opened a missile testing station there. The location was perfect for testing missiles. It was isolated and would not threaten humans, so that means it wasn't very populated. So when they were testing missiles, they didn't have to worry about harming people. The climate was temperate year-round and provided a great many launching opportunities. So if you notice, we live in Florida, we don't experience these really bad winters. For the most part, our weather kind of stays the same throughout the year. Yes, it gets hot, but it doesn't get super cold, and we have a lot of sunny days. So the weather pretty much stays the same. So it's really good for launches. And then it was on the coast and had access to tracking stations in the Caribbean. Okay, so because of where Cape Canaveral is located, it was easy to track what they were launching. All right, the beginning of the space program. On July 24th, 1950, a small rocket was launched from Cape Canaveral, marking the true beginning of the space program. Rockets were launched throughout the next decade in an effort to keep up with the Soviet Union's budding space program. So we were kind of competing with the Soviet Union because they had a really advanced space program. So for the next decade, that's a period of 10 years, we were trying to keep up with them. The Cape Canaveral space program brought businesses to Florida and began to boost the economy. Jobs and opportunities became available in the area. Pan American World Airways, the Radio Corporation of America, Trans World Airlines, General Electric, and the Martin Marietta Company all opened branches near the Cape. So really, this Cape Canaveral space program was really important to Florida because it brought all these big businesses to Florida and it began to boost the economy. So meaning it brought a lot of money into Florida. In 1958, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, which is NASA, was created. NASA is a federal agency chartered to conduct space operations. NASA employed mostly civilians, so that means just regular people. Originally, NASA oversaw launching and supervising satellites that had scientific, weather, and communication capabilities. Goal: man on the moon. In 1961, when President John F. Kennedy announced that the United States would put a man on the moon before the end of the decade, NASA's space program took on an entirely new sense of importance. Project Mercury was developed to enable man to orbit the Earth. The capsules used in this project were only large enough for one man. On February 20th, 1962, John Glenn became the first American to go into orbit. Okay, and then if you look, there is a little illustration. It says, landing a man on the moon was an important milestone in the exploration of space. Okay. In 1963, NASA acquired almost 90,000 acres on Merritt Island near the Cape. A large complex of buildings was established on the property, destined to become the hub of the American space industry. In that complex, the astronauts were trained and space rockets were built. When President Kennedy was assassinated later in the year, the Cape's name was changed to Cape Kennedy, but it was later changed back to Cape Canaveral. However, the complex was renamed the Kennedy Space Center. So all the buildings made up the Kennedy Space Center. The next step was the development of the Gemini program. This program involved building larger spacecraft that could hold 2 astronauts. The Gemini program initiated docking with other spacecrafts, extended the length of space flights, and made possible spacewalks to gain more information about the unknown frontier of space. The program was very successful, and all the goals were met within the decade. So within that span of 10 years, all the goals were met in the Gemini program. So again, the Gemini program is important because they were trying to build a larger spacecraft that could hold 2 astronauts. Okay, so you're going to want to remember that for your quiz. The space program continued to expand with the Apollo program. The Apollo program finally fulfilled the promise made by Kennedy when on July 20th, 1969, Neil Armstrong stepped on the surface of the moon and said, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." If you remember, we talked about this specific quote in one of the last stories that we read before we went on break. Visits to the moon continued as NASA continued to redesign itself and its mission. Space Shuttle. The Space Shuttle program began in the 70s and flourished, that means did really well or got really big, in the 80s. Florida once again became the center of attention as this new spacecraft concept made space travel less of a dream and more of a reality. Attending launches became an exciting experience for Floridians and other Americans. Throughout the state, people who had never thought about the space program could stand outside their homes and watch the shuttle go into space. The entire state suffered on January 28, 1986, when the Challenger space shuttle exploded and killed all 7 members of the crew, including teacher Krista McAuliffe, the first civilian astronaut. Cape Canaveral today, launch pad to the stars. Despite tragedy and setbacks, Florida remains closely associated with NASA and the space program. Today, young and old tourists can go to Cape Canaveral and visit the Kennedy Space Center, Spaceport USA, and the Astronaut Hall of Fame. They can visit exhibitions that recount the history of manned spaceflight, take guided tours of launch pads, and find out all about NASA and its plans for the future. The Kennedy Space Center opens a fascinating window to the vastness of space. It has become a launch pad to the stars. Okay, and then they have a little picture there. All right, so main things that you want to know. It is really important. The space program was important to Florida because it brought a lot of business to Florida, big businesses to Florida. It created a lot of jobs in Florida, okay, and it brought money into Florida. So it helped boost the economy. Okay. I want you to remember that the main man whose goal was to put a man on the moon was John F. Kennedy. And then I also want you to remember that the Gemini program was important because the goal of that was to build a spacecraft that could hold 2 people. Okay, but also what they wanted to do was dock with other spacecraft. So that means like kind of connect with other spacecrafts. They wanted to make the length of space flights longer. And they wanted to make it possible for astronauts to go on spacewalks. Okay, so all those goals were met. So it was successful. All right, so today you're gonna go through. I want you to do the vocab matching. Use your context clues to help you. So you're going to want to go back in the article to look for the vocab words. And then, like I said, if you have extra time, the crossword is a great way to review for the quiz. Okay, and we will do some review in our Zoom meeting as well. All right, so let me go back to our agenda. All right, so at this point today, we're going to have our 3rd Reading Plus lesson passed, 80% or higher. We are going to pick 2 activities to complete in the Reading Wednesday 4-15 packet. And we're going to answer the questions in our journal or on a separate sheet of paper. And don't forget, you need to make sure that you do those stretch questions. Okay. We're going to listen to Holes chapters 27 and 28 and write in our journal for 10 minutes about what we read. Okay, and then I want you to complete the Cape Canaveral vocab. And you can use your article. Like I said, really try to use your article and your context clues, but if you're having trouble, you can always check your work with a dictionary, but we can go over some of this in our Zoom meeting too. All right, so you guys have been doing a really good job. Just make sure you're keeping up with the Reading Plus, that you're paying attention to personal messages to make sure you're not missing any work. And if you have any other questions, just feel free to send me a message. We'll do another Zoom meeting at 12:45. It's not required, but I hope you all can make it just because it's a good time for everybody to see each other, us to share different things that are going on, and just to kind of review some of the work and make sure we're all staying, on track with everything. All right, so I hope everybody has a great day, and I will see you at our next meeting. Bye, guys.